The Zenith Collegiate Institute floated in the serene darkness of the Andromeda sector like a crystalline soap bubble that someone had spent far too much money on. Established in the year 2847 by the Galactic Educational Concordat, it represented the pinnacle of multi-species higher learning, which was a fancy way of saying it was where rich aliens sent their offspring to get degrees in advanced basket weaving and theoretical philosophy, while networking with future oligarchs. The station itself was a marvel of engineering, 17 interconnected biodomes, each calibrated to support different atmospheric compositions, gravity settings, and environmental parameters. It had to be. The student body represented 43 different species, and approximately 42 of them would die horribly if exposed to conditions that any of the other 42 considered normal. To call these students delicate would be an insult to fine china. The Krixians, for instance, were crystalline life forms who required constant humidity control and whose bodies would literally shatter if subjected to vibrations above 15 decibels. The Velphor were gaseous entities contained in specialized environmental suits, perpetually terrified that a strong breeze might disperse their consciousness across 3 star systems. The Krixians resembled ambulatory jellyfish and needed to be suspended in specialized gel tanks just to attend lectures. Even the hardiest species, the Xanthorians with their 12 eye stalks and bureaucratic dispositions, treated a stubbed toe as a medical emergency, requiring 3 specialists and a trauma counselor. This delightful collection of ambulatory safety hazards was overseen by Guardian 7, an artificial intelligence so advanced it made other AI systems look like particularly clever abacuses. Guardian 7 had been designed by the finest programmers in the galaxy with one singular purpose: keep the students alive. Its sensor network could detect a student's heart rate irregularity from 3 biodomes away. It monitored atmospheric composition down to parts per trillion. It had contingency protocols for threats ranging from asteroid impacts to interdimensional incursions to someone bringing peanuts into a nut-free zone. In its 5 years of operation, Guardian 7 had never encountered a situation it couldn't handle with elegant efficiency and minimal fuss. That streak was about to end spectacularly. Earth occupied a special place in galactic consciousness, nestled comfortably between myth and nightmare fuel. Officially classified as a Class 1-2 Deathworld, it was the kind of planet that made xenobiologists drink heavily and question their career choices. The gravity alone would pulverize most species into organic pancakes. The atmosphere was corrosive enough to dissolve Krixian crystal in minutes. The native predators included creatures that could sprint at highway speeds while possessing teeth designed by evolution's most sadistic engineer. And the weather? The weather treated natural disasters like a competitive sport, throwing hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, and blizzards around with the casual enthusiasm of a child throwing toys. But the real horror show was the dominant species. Humans had evolved on this nightmare planet the way diamonds form under pressure. Except diamonds don't develop complex tool use and a frankly disturbing sense of humor about mortality. They were bipedal nightmares wrapped in skin that was simultaneously their weakest and most adaptable feature. They ate toxins for fun and called it spicy food. They voluntarily jumped out of aircraft for entertainment. They kept carnivorous predators in their homes and called them pets. Their idea of bonding involved hitting each other repeatedly in supervised environments called sports. They had literally weaponized their own immune systems to the point where they carried diseases that would devastate entire alien populations while they themselves just got a bit sniffly. The Galactic Educational Concordat had debated for 3 years whether to accept the human transfer application. Some argued it was a progressive step toward true multi-species integration, a beacon of hope for expanding the boundaries of cooperative learning. Others suggested it was functionally equivalent to adopting a black hole as a mascot and expecting it to behave at graduation ceremonies. Eventually, bureaucracy won out over common sense, as it so often does, and the application was approved with the caveat that the human would be closely monitored and carefully integrated into the student population with appropriate safety measures. Which brought us to Mara Chen, standing in the arrival bay with a duffel bag and an expression that suggested she was already regretting her life choices. Mara was 17 standard years old, which by human standards meant she was practically made of invincibility, complex and poor decision-making skills held together with optimism and spite. She had applied to Zenith Collegiate on a whim after scoring exceptionally high on the Universal Aptitude Assessment, not quite grasping that universal meant she had outperformed species with brains the size of refrigerators and cognitive capabilities that made quantum computers look like pocket calculators. She was of average height for a human female, which meant she towered over 60% of the student body like a skyscraper in a neighborhood of particularly nervous garden gnomes. Her black hair was pulled into a practical ponytail, and she wore the standard issue academy jumpsuit that had been specially reinforced because apparently normal fabric was considered tissue paper by Terran standards. The welcome committee consisted of Headmaster Krixians, a Zenithorian whose 12 eye stalks were currently arranged in what his species considered a friendly greeting but looked more like a biological hazard warning. Beside him stood 3 security officers in full protective gear, as if Mara might spontaneously combust or possibly explode into a shower of deadly projectiles. Behind them, a medical team waited on standby with equipment that seemed excessive for greeting a teenage girl. "Welcome, Student Chen, to Zenith Collegiate Institute," Krixians said through his translator, which rendered his chittering sounds into galactic standard with only minimal loss of meaning. "We have prepared comprehensive orientation materials and safety protocols for your integration into our community." "Thanks," Mara said, and the security officers flinched at the volume. She had been speaking normally, for a human, which apparently qualified as a sonic weapon to everyone else. She noticed their reaction and tried again, whispering, "Is this better?" "Much," Krixians said, though 6 of his eye stalks were still quivering with what might have been residual fear. "Please, follow me. We have much to discuss." The orientation was an exercise in absurdist theater that would have been hilarious if Mara wasn't living through it. She learned that she would need to wear a special badge that broadcast a warning signal to nearby students, similar to how nuclear facilities marked radioactive materials. She would have her own section of the dormitory, with reinforced walls capable of withstanding small explosions, because apparently human sleep movements were considered potentially catastrophic. The gymnasium had been deemed off-limits after simulations suggested her presence might cause unacceptable risk to equipment and bystanders, which was their polite way of saying she could accidentally kill someone with a volleyball. She was required to attend daily medical check-ins to ensure she wasn't developing any of the approximately 9,000 diseases that humans carried asymptomatically but could devastate other species like a biological apocalypse. The list went on. She couldn't visit the botanical gardens because her breath contained too much carbon dioxide. She needed a permit to use the recreational facilities. Her dietary requirements necessitated a separate food preparation area because human food was apparently toxic to 17 different species. She would be assigned a personal safety monitor, a small drone that would follow her everywhere to ensure she didn't accidentally cause mass casualties by doing something humans considered normal. "Just to clarify," Mara said during the 3rd hour of orientation, her patience wearing dangerously thin, "I'm not allowed in the gym. I can't touch any of the plants in the botanical dome. I need a permit to use stairs because the vibrations might disturb Krixian students, and I have to eat in isolation because my food is classified as a biohazard." "Correct," Krixians said, 6 of his eye stalks nodding while the other 6 maintained vigilant watch, as if she might go feral at any moment and start gnawing on the furniture. "We believe these precautions will ensure harmonious coexistence for all members of our diverse academic community. We want you to feel welcome, while also ensuring the safety of your fellow students." Right. Harmonious. Welcome. Mara wondered if it was too late to transfer to literally anywhere else, including back to Earth where at least the dangers were honest about trying to kill you instead of wrapping you in bureaucratic bubble wrap. The first week was a surreal nightmare of bubble-wrapped existence that made Mara feel less like a student and more like a particularly dangerous zoo exhibit. Her classmates treated her like a ticking bomb wrapped in prettier wrapping paper and topped with a bow made of bad decisions. The Krixians gave her a minimum radius of 10 meters, scurrying away with soft tinkling sounds if she got any closer. The Velphor adjusted their environmental suits to maximum density whenever she passed, their gaseous forms compressing with audible whooshing sounds. Even the Thraxians, who were generally too zen to worry about much, seemed to shimmer nervously in their gel tanks when she entered a room, their tentacles curling into protective configurations. The professors were only slightly better. They called on her during lectures, with the careful tone of bomb disposal experts, asking the explosive how it was feeling today. When she raised her hand to ask questions, there was always a moment of collective breath-holding, as if her curiosity might physically manifest as a shockwave. One professor actually ended class early after Mara sneezed, triggering a minor panic among the Krixian students who thought the sound was an explosion. Her dormitory situation was equally isolating. She had an entire wing to herself, separated from the other students by 3 sets of blast doors and an atmospheric barrier. Her room was sparse and utilitarian, with reinforced furniture that looked like it belonged in a military bunker rather than a student residence. The bed could support 5 times her weight. The desk was bolted to the floor. Even the bathroom fixtures were industrial grade, as if they expected her to accidentally destroy them through normal use. At night, lying in her reinforced bed in her isolated wing, Mara would stare at the ceiling and wonder what she had gotten herself into. On Earth, she had been nobody special. Average grades, average athletic ability, average social life. She had applied to Zenith Collegiate because it seemed like an adventure, a chance to see the galaxy and meet alien species. She hadn't expected to be treated like a walking natural disaster. The only student who didn't treat her like a biohazard was also the only one who treated her worse. Vexthor Caldrian was a Zalthoran, which was a species that had evolved on a planet with slightly higher gravity than galactic average, and had consequently developed a superiority complex, the size of a gas giant and twice as dense. Zalthorans were bipedal, covered in sleek chitinous plates that shimmered with iridescent colors ranging from deep purples to brilliant golds, depending on their mood and social status. They possessed 3-fingered hands that they used primarily for gesturing dismissively at species they considered inferior, which was most of them, and occasionally for actual productive work when absolutely necessary. Vexthor came from money, the kind of generational wealth that made entire planets economically dependent on his family's mining operations. His ancestors had claimed mineral rights to 3 star systems back when interstellar law was more suggestion than regulation, and they had parlayed that into a commercial empire that supplied rare elements to half the galaxy. He wore custom-fitted academy uniforms that probably cost more than a shuttlecraft and were tailored to display his iridescent plates to maximum effect. His entourage consisted of 5 other students who laughed at his jokes with the desperate enthusiasm of people whose tuition was being paid by his family's charitable foundation and who understood that their academic futures depended on keeping him happy. He had decided, upon learning a human was attending Zenith Collegiate, that this was a personal affront to civilized society and an insult to everything his family had built over generations. A Deathworlder, he had announced in comparative xenobiology class during the first week, his translator dripping with contempt thick enough to bottle and sell as a condiment. How progressive. Next, they will be admitting parasitic fungi and calling it diversity. Perhaps we can enroll a supernova or a particularly aggressive virus as well. I hear there are some lovely plague vectors looking for educational opportunities. His entourage had laughed on cue, though a few of them had cast nervous glances at Mara to see if the human would react violently to the insult. The professor had made a weak attempt to redirect the discussion, but Vexthor's family donations made disciplining him a complicated political matter. Mara had ignored him, mostly because she was still trying to figure out how to use the classroom's environmental controls without accidentally adjusting the oxygen content to lethal levels for everyone else. The control panel had 43 different settings, each calibrated for a different species, and she lived in constant fear of hitting the wrong button and committing accidental genocide. But Vexthor was not a person who handled being ignored well. He had spent his entire life as the center of attention, the most important person in any room, and having someone refuse to acknowledge his presence was intolerable. Over the following days, his comments became more pointed. He questioned her intelligence during class discussions, suggesting that Deathworlders compensated for cognitive deficiencies with brute physicality. He made elaborate shows of moving away from her with exaggerated caution, as if she were leaking radiation or trailing infectious diseases. He loudly discussed the declining standards of the academy with his entourage whenever Mara was within earshot, lamenting that they now accepted anyone with a pulse, regardless of whether they belonged in civilized society. Mara continued to ignore him, which only made things worse. She had dealt with bullies on Earth, and they all operated from the same playbook. They wanted attention and reaction. Deny them both, and they eventually moved on to easier targets. What she failed to account for was that Velphor had never been denied anything in his entire life, and he saw her silence as a challenge rather than dismissal. The cafeteria at Zenith Collegiate was less a dining hall and more a logistical nightmare disguised as a building. Each species required different nutritional inputs, and mixing food preparation areas was strictly forbidden after the incident of 2845 that no one spoke about, but everyone knew had involved cross-contamination and 3 weeks of station-wide quarantine. The result was a massive space divided into 43 different zones, each sealed with atmospheric barriers and serving species-appropriate cuisine that ranged from crystallized minerals to concentrated gases to things that looked like they were still trying to escape the plate. Mara's zone was in the back corner, isolated like a quarantine ward. Her food options consisted of items that had been carefully screened to ensure they wouldn't accidentally poison any other species through proximity or aerosolized particles, which meant she got a lot of nutrient paste and very little that resembled actual food. The paste came in 3 colors, gray, beige, and a disturbing green that suggested it had given up on life. Today's lunch was the gray variety, gelatinous and flavorless, tasting like someone had tried to make food from the concept of disappointment and had succeeded beyond their wildest dreams. She was eating mechanically, reviewing notes for her interstellar economics class on a datapad, trying to understand supply chain theory for species that didn't experience linear time the same way humans did. The material was fascinating but dense, requiring concentration she was struggling to maintain while consuming what was technically food but felt more like eating seasoned sadness. The cafeteria hummed with the usual lunch crowd noise, the tinkling of Krixian students, the whooshing of Velphor environmental suits, the gentle splashing of Krixians in their gel tanks. It was almost peaceful, in a weird alien sort of way. Mara had started to find comfort in these sounds, proof that despite everything, life went on. That's when Velphor and his entourage decided to grace her section with their presence. The primitive feeds, Velphor announced, loud enough that several nearby zones went quiet, and students pressed against their atmospheric barriers to watch. His voice carried that particular quality of someone who had practiced their insults in front of a mirror. Tell me, Deathworlder, does your species still hunt its food with stone tools, or have you graduated to sharpen sticks? Perhaps you club your meals unconscious and drag them back to your cave? Do you grunt in satisfaction as you consume raw flesh torn from still living prey? His entourage laughed with the enthusiasm of sycophants everywhere, the sound tinny through their environmental suits. A few other students from different species had stopped eating to watch the confrontation, sensing drama with the universal instinct of teenagers everywhere. Some were recording on their datapads, no doubt planning to share the footage on whatever social media platforms their species used. Mara looked up, sighed deeply, and went back to her notes. She had dealt with bullies before, Earth had plenty of them, and they all used the same playbook regardless of how many fingers they had or what color their exoskeletons were. Ignore them, don't give them the reaction they want, and eventually they get bored and move on to easier targets. Ignoring me? Velphor's translator somehow conveyed his sneer perfectly, adding layers of condescension that transcended language barriers. How typical. Your kind probably lacks the cognitive capacity for witty comebacks. All that muscle mass must drain resources from your tiny brain. It's a wonder you can walk upright and breathe simultaneously. Perhaps you should return to whatever mudball spawned you and leave education to those of us actually capable of abstract thought. Mara set down her spork, a utensil that was somehow worse than both spoons and forks individually and represented the worst of both implements. Look, I'm just trying to eat lunch. Can you go be superior somewhere else? Maybe in a mirror? You seem like you'd enjoy that. The watching students made various sounds of surprise that translated across species as collective "oh." Talking back to Velphor was not something that happened often. His family's influence made challenging him a risky proposition for anyone concerned about their future prospects. How dare you, Velphor started, his chest plates flushing with an angry purple hue that indicated his emotional state was moving from merely annoyed to genuinely angry. Do you have any idea who you're speaking to? My family owns mining operations in 3-star systems. We employ millions. We supply rare elements to the entire Galactic Council. You are nothing. A statistical anomaly, a charity case from a backward world that only recently discovered interstellar travel. I'm serious, Mara said, keeping her voice level and trying to project calm reasonableness despite the anger building in her chest. I've had a long week. I'm tired of being treated like I'm radioactive. I just want to eat this terrible excuse for food and review my notes. So unless you're planning to say something actually interesting or contribute meaningfully to my understanding of economic theory, please leave. The cafeteria had gone completely silent. Now, across multiple zones, students watched through atmospheric barriers with the horrified fascination of people witnessing a traffic accident in slow motion. Even the cafeteria staff had stopped their food preparation to watch, their various appendages frozen mid-task. Velphor's flush deepened to a shade of purple that probably indicated either rage or a medical emergency. His entourage had gone quiet, no longer laughing, sensing that something had shifted in the dynamic. You dare dismiss me? Do you have any idea who my family is? We owned 3-star systems before your species discovered fire. We were building interstellar trade networks while your ancestors were still living in trees and throwing their own feces. You are an evolutionary accident permitted to attend this institution out of misguided charity, and you speak to me as if we are equals. Good for you, Mara said, her own patience finally wearing through. She was tired of being polite, tired of being careful, tired of being treated like either a threat or a joke. You want a medal or something. Maybe a certificate of achievement for being born rich. I'm sure your ancestors were very impressive. That has nothing to do with me trying to eat lunch or with you being an insufferable bully who mistakes family wealth for personal worth. The watching crowd collectively held their breath. No one spoke to Velphor like that. No one dared. What happened next occurred in the space between heartbeats, in that crystallized moment where decisions are made faster than conscious thought can intervene. Velphor, in a display of physical dominance that worked on literally every other species in the academy, reached out and grabbed Mara's shoulder with his 3-fingered hand. He intended to shove her backward, to establish his superiority through physical means, to demonstrate that he was the apex predator in this interaction. His grip was firm, designed to intimidate without causing actual injury, calibrated for species that understood such social dynamics. For Velphor, it was a power move he had executed hundreds of times before. For every other species at the academy, physical dominance was established through such displays, and the weaker party would back down, acknowledging their place in the hierarchy. He had made one critical miscalculation. Mara Chen was not from the galaxy he knew. Mara's instincts, honed by 17 years on a planet where everything from the weather to the wildlife to the bacteria was trying to kill you, interpreted the sudden grab as a threat. Her body responded before her conscious mind could intervene, before she could calculate appropriate force or consider consequences. Adrenaline flooded her system at levels that would have killed most species in the cafeteria. Muscle memory took over, reflexes trained by thousands of years of evolution on a world where hesitation meant death. She stood, her chair scraping backward with a screech that made several Krixians crack slightly. She twisted her torso for optimal power transfer, her body moving with the practiced efficiency of a species that had fought its way to the top of the food chain on a planet that didn't believe in easy victories. And she delivered what she considered a light defensive strike to get him to back off and establish boundaries. A basic jab. Textbook form. The kind of punch that, in a human schoolyard, might have resulted in a detention, an ice pack, and a lecture about keeping your hands to yourself. The kind of strike a human teenager might use to push away an annoying sibling or deter an aggressive peer. Her fist connected with Velphor's chest plate, with a sound that would haunt the nightmares of everyone present. The impact was somewhere between a crack and a crunch, like someone stepping on a bag of chips in a library, except the chips were made of alien exoskeleton, and the library was a space station full of witnesses who would never forget what they saw. Velphor's iridescent armor, designed to withstand the pressures of his homeworld's environment and protect against the various hazards of civilized life. Spiderweb with fractures that spread from the impact point like frozen lightning. The cracks glowed briefly with bioluminescent fluid before darkening, each fracture line a testament to forces that should not have been possible from biological tissue. His three-fingered hands released her shoulder as his entire body left the ground, traveling backward through the air with the graceless trajectory of a badly thrown football tumbling end over end. He rotated slightly, his limbs flailing, his expression frozen in a mask of shock that his translator couldn't begin to render into words. He hit the back wall of the cafeteria 7 meters away. 7 meters. The distance was precisely measured by Guardian 7 sensors, logged with clinical accuracy alongside the impact velocity, trajectory angle, and estimated force. The impact left a Zalthoran-shaped dent in the reinforced metal, a perfect silhouette like a cartoon character going through a wall. The metal, designed to withstand hull breaches and explosive decompression, actually buckled inward, creating stress fractures that radiated out from the impact site. Velphor slid down to the floor and stayed there, making small wheezing sounds that his translator rendered as distressed chirrups. His chest plate was visibly damaged, pieces of it falling away to reveal the softer tissue beneath. His breathing was labored, each inhale producing a whistling sound that suggested things inside him were not where they should be. The cafeteria remained frozen in silence. 43 different species, each with their own concepts of violence and conflict, and united in their universal understanding that they had just witnessed something that should not have been physically possible. According to everything they knew about biology, physics, and the fundamental laws of the universe. Mara looked at her fist, then at Velphor crumpled against the wall 23 feet away, then at her fist again. "Oh no," she said quietly, her voice small and horrified. "Oh no, I barely touched him. That was maybe 20%. Oh God, is he breathing? Someone check if he's breathing." Somewhere in the station's computational core, 17 levels below the cafeteria and insulated behind layers of quantum shielding, Guardian 7's threat assessment algorithms experienced what could only be described as a complete system panic. Its sensors had detected the punch. It had measured the kinetic force with instruments calibrated to detect atomic-level impacts. It had calculated the velocity at 47 meters per second, the impact pressure at 3,847 newtons per square centimeter, the energy transfer at levels comparable to small explosives, and its conclusions, reached through millions of calculations performed in microseconds, were very simple and very alarming. Those numbers were not possible for biological life forms operating without mechanical augmentation. Those numbers suggested weapons-grade military hardware, disguised as a student. Those numbers indicated a plasma cannon or kinetic accelerator, not a fist made of flesh and bone. Those numbers meant there was a catastrophic threat loose on the station, something that had bypassed every security protocol and was now operating freely among the student population, capable of inflicting mass casualties with casual ease. Alarms began blaring throughout the entire station with a volume and urgency that had never been heard before. Not the polite "please be aware" chimes used for minor issues like scheduling conflicts or atmospheric imbalances, but the full-throated klaxons reserved for station-ending emergencies like hull breaches, reactor meltdowns, or hostile boarding actions by enemy military forces. The sound was designed to cut through any species' auditory range, a universal signal of existential danger that triggered